going, Sean?
Now that you've had the opportunity,
Yeah, I'm everywhere. I get disease.
there we go. Now that you've had the opportunity to share your ideas amongst your small groups, it's time to hear what each group discussed. I will ask each facilitator to line up at the microphone to present the takeaway points from their groups in 30 seconds or less. Quite the challenge. We will cycle through the facilitators one after the other, so please be prepared to speak, and keep within the time limits.
Okay, great. So our group found the process of trying to separate out adaptation and mitigation to be really frustrating and wanted to focus more on high-level value statements that they want the government to implement as part of their climate strategy. One of the points that we had was to end the focus on endless growth and begin to plan an economy that's a retractive economy. They also said that we have to stop putting economy first as if it's a separate thing above and beyond everything, and that it has to be in the context of social and environment, but not something that has to be put first. And that we need to, government needs to look at the impacts and do case studies because Canadians are willing to sacrifice if they know what they're sacrificing for.
Hi everyone. So my group was working on mitigation. Our 2 points are to incentivize renewable energy and plant-based foods, so agriculture and plant-based foods. And instead of incentivizing the fossil fuel industry, remove subsidies from the fossil fuel industry. Also, we want to make our industries accountable for the pollution and waste that each company produces.
Hi everyone. My group talked about shifting values, and we thought that there are 2 primary ways of doing that. So as individuals and community members, we can shift values by doing things locally, but the government can also set an example for us by shifting values before we address mitigation initiatives. And so if the government were to step up and, for example, implement a national carbon tax, that would help us support that process. And then we can start addressing problems such as the beet crisis, the fish in the north and the inability of indigenous people there to eat them, landfills filled with hazardous waste, and a reoccurring point in my group was the fact that why is beef much cheaper to buy than salad?
The underlying point that my group approach was mostly about just planning and making sure that we're not just planning for the short term, but planning for the long term, and that the government provides the funding and the policy for all scales, whether it's the local municipalities or as well for the larger, greater scales, so that they can actually get things done. The 2 main things that our group approached were agriculture and infrastructure. From the infrastructure perspective, one of the main implementations that we looked at were microgrids as a way to adapt to climate change. From an agricultural perspective, we looked at using gardens and things like that to enhance food security. One of the main concerns from our group was that we couldn't do that and we take jobs away from larger agriculture, but that we could. But then, in order by planning where you're growing where, is that you can use what's local and make sure that what you're growing in the local area is more relevant to that, so you're not taking jobs away.
All right, I'll keep it short. Transition away from fossil fuels to a lower carbon / renewable energy economy. Number 2, incentivize the use of renewable energy at multiple levels. For example, cogeneration with industry, thermal grids at the municipal and urban areas, and through retrofits and modified building codes at the personal household level. Number 3, we need leadership at the national level with regards to transportation, for example, through a national transportation strategy. And an example of this could be modifying our rail systems to passenger and freight, and common values that we had were social justice, so really supporting workers in transition, public health and well-being, both social and environmental.
Alright, so my group, we came up with 3 succinct ideas to share. The first one being increase public awareness and education on the severity and the urgency of the problem, as well as mitigation strategies. Incentivize public transportation in order to reduce our reliance on personal vehicles. And the third was to share a moral imperative to act for future generations.
Our group struggled with adaptation versus mitigation. One of the things some of the things we came up with, no more handouts for the traditional auto sector, fund only green, clean electric vehicles. Water must become a right, not a commodity. Federal home program to support net zero homes, restrictions on where to build them, and education. We need to educate the next generation so that they can innovate and not shoulder the problem. We need to help them find a solution, and also diets promote an alternative to the existing protein diet.
Hi, our group was focused on food and community building. So our first point was localized food growing in a sustainable manner, as well as localized control of the watershed. Design weatherproof buildings that are vertical and have room for growing food in them. Also, encourage and invest in more community and neighborhood initiatives to bring social groups together, build community around, build more of a social life, and help people connect. Thank you.
Our group emphasized a carbon tax, $30 per ton within 1 year, recommended a border tax for imported goods from countries that don't have this carbon tax, and the tax should be used to reduce CO2 and income tax, as BC was given an example. Transportation of food, eat locally, tax imported food if it does not violate trade agreements. Planned communities, Don Mills was given this example as an old planned community, but all needs within a certain small radius.
Our group came up with 4 main ideas. 1, incentivize new technology and make existing technology more accessible. 2, public education on adaptation strategies and climate science, not just through school system, but through public service announcements, the continued funding of science, and the dissemination of information. 3, a national food policy that puts climate impacts at its center, incorporates imports and transportation, and protects arable land. And 4, implements a national carbon pricing policy based on fee and dividend.
To encourage mitigation, our group suggested that the Climate Action Plan had a 4th pillar, that being education. That we demystify climate change through enforcing labeling standards to show carbon impact and energy use, which will enable Canadian consumers to make informed decisions that support a green economy and show environmental cost, and that the change has to start at the local level.
We've bantered around several different flavors of problems with economic models. We think we need full cost accounting, we need federal leadership on how to internalize externalities. A quick example is home energy retrofits, where the money the federal government invested made more money for the government back in HST and taxes than it spent. We need more of that. And we need enabling local independence, teaching on growing local food, teaching on the benefits of organic and vegetarian diet, training municipal politicians on how they can enable further local actions. Those are the 2, full cost accounting, enabling local independence. Thank you.
We had 3 areas. One was internationally, all international trade agreements must allow for the protection of our environment. This is referring to the TPP and other similar agreements. Nationally, we require a national transportation strategy, grids for electric cars, high-speed rail. There's no reason why you can't have a high-speed rail right down the middle of the 401. Rail improvements all across the country that make it easier to get around. And the 3rd one was retrofitting communities, urban design. And some of those things have already been mentioned.
Hello, our group identified a lot of specific solutions to problems that we already know we're going to face. We recognize that there's a diversity of ideas and things that we know that already work out there, so we don't necessarily need new ideas and new things to be developed. Those are important too, but let's focus on the low-hanging fruit and implement that first. So instead of trying to control nature, for example, let's think about where the floodplains are and put soccer fields there instead of communities. Think about performance-based incentives instead of restrictions, and just plan for what we know is coming. Thank you.
So we were kind of all over the place. We found that our ideas were bigger than our post-it notes, but as general themes, we had government subsidies, sort of oil subsidies and agriculture subsidies, and sort of emphasizing agriculture for vegetables and not for cows. And then a bunch of policy ideas around co-ops, around whether we should support nuclear energy, carbon controls, also ratifying treaties and making sure that we actually keep to them, and also within provincial governments, making sure that we reduce the barriers between governments provincially as well as international.
Okay, so our group had 3 clusters, and they're going to sound somewhat familiar. Transportation, electrifying light-duty vehicles, cars, and including the incentives, more rail and public transportation investment, and offsets and tax on airfare. Then in the oil and gas sector, no more pipelines, no subsidization of the oil sands. If the oil sands are not an efficient source, then leave it in the ground. Carbon tax and dividends, and everything must include a combination of education and persuasion, incentives, and regulation.
Hi, our team was a real powerhouse of ideas, but it broke down into 3 basic areas: education, technology, and motivation. Under education, we would be looking to change our culture, our thinking, and our actions to support local initiatives, support renewable energy. And under technology, we were looking for tangible pilot projects which support and integrate renewable technologies. And under motivation, the question was, what will it take to change? And I really must say this. One of our team members was very keen on establishing an international context to ensure a level playing field so that, we are global team players.
My group is more focused on policy and government. They want an aggressive climate change strategy. They think it's obvious there's the support for it, given how many people showed up here. And they think it should happen immediately and not be delayed. They also feel that there should be an integration of environmental policy into other policies, such as transportation, business, and innovation, just to name a few. And they think that all levels of government should be proactive, and that they need to be held accountable to make sure they're doing their part.
Our group was kind of all over too, but some of our points were making all motorized transportation electric from renewable resources, make our energy cleaner and carbon-free, make all buildings, private and public, produce and store renewable energy, invest in sustainable agriculture, protect our forests and expand our natural carbon sinks. Use carbon pricing to fund the transition to a fossil fuel economy through incentives and taxes, and incorporate social sustainability into our education curriculum, and give us a mass media campaign about greenhouse gases and water and deforestation, and let people know what the issues are and where the problems are and what things we're using. Thank you.
Table 11 was about mitigation. The very first point was about moral education, establishing a different mindset and attitude towards nature, that it is not a commodity, that we need to live more simply with less waste and consider ourselves a part of nature, not apart from it. Looking for solutions for the whole biosphere is one local example. Things like legalizing tiny homes, both provincially and municipally. because they're not currently legal, so we can't look smaller. The second is a national water strategy. Change the Fisheries Act. Stop bottling water. Absolutely halt fracking. Respect water for life. Use rainwater harvesting. And 3, and the last point, have a long horizon on political thinking from our leaders. Don't sign the TPP and think about the grandchildren instead of the next election.
So our group was focused on adaptation, and we recognize that it's hard to separate adaptation and mitigation. So we want government to focus on long-term adaptation solutions that also work to mitigate the worst effects of climate change. We recognize that all levels of government need to work together, and we want the government to focus on solutions that empower communities to meet their own needs locally. So needs like energy, food, water, shelter, and we also need a national plan that's flexible enough to allow diverse communities to meet those diverse needs. Thank you.
So our group was working with adaptation, and we discussed a number of ideas, but decided to distill it down to one main recommendation that kind of incorporates a lot of those issues. And that is we wanted to make sure that there are policies and incentives put in place in order to shift agricultural production practices to reduce the need for so much land and water. And while doing so, provide incentives to shift consumption patterns towards greater use of plant alternatives and less animal products that have a lower carbon footprint, and we believe that would be related to a lot of the issues on the table.
To retrofit buildings, to incentivize your retrofits so that they're energy efficient, and all new buildings to have renewable energy integrated into their construction, and that be mandated to start in 2020. Energy, we need to incentivize renewables so that we actually can get off of the fossil fuels. For transportation, we need to green all transportation mandated by 2030. So that includes all personal vehicles as well as public transit. For consumerism, we need to reduce packaging and ban water bottles now. All packaging needs to be biodegradable or recyclable. We need to get into local food. Instead of lawns, we need fruit trees and local gardens to reduce transportation costs and to have a healthy local economy.
The group that I was a part of, we discussed adaptation, and our overall thought on that was to plan for adaptation so as to be more aware and responsive as opposed to reactive to climate crisis. We talked about education and leadership and how that has to happen hand in hand, in particular at the education level of the demographic that we don't see here in the room tonight, and changing curriculum to teach our children how to live sustainably on every level. Innovation in adapting our rural agricultural practices as well as our urban infrastructure with regard to transportation and the construction of our buildings and our urban planning and net zero communities.
So my group decided that we want federal initiatives that can impact local communities, such as widespread awareness programs, including education for elementaries and high school kids. Other federal initiatives such as public transportation and incentives for retrofits for sustainable housing. And the other main point was we want to move towards a clean energy economy. So first of all, we have to set up federal legislation to force the oil companies to clean up their oil spills and to reduce their pollution. And we want to reduce our reliance on fossil fuels, which includes no more pipelines, etc.
We want the government to take action on adaptation in 4 areas. Practical ideas. Take local action for our immediate community. Solve programs locally before thinking globally. Resources are money, materials, people, time, and effort. Collaborate with key partnerships with government, business, NGOs, and the private sector. Education. Provide increased public awareness for science about local issues, how climate change affects us locally, and provide incentives to move from knowledge to actions. These are our plans for resilience.
Our group wanted to impress upon the urgency of this matter, and that whatever actions we decide upon, they have to start now. However, our mitigation solution was to put upon a carbon fee and dividend and make the current carbon economy more transparent so we know where the emissions are coming from and where they're going, and transition to a green economy through using what we have in terms of green technologies and renewables and embracing the new up-and-coming ideas.
Our group was talking about adaptation. We talked about 4 different sectors: agriculture, transportation, development goals, geoengineering. We also talked about how government policies are there, but they need more teeth and they need to be implemented more, and more action needs to be taken. We talked about geoengineering as a very emphatic way. Geoengineering already going on, and it is effectively affecting our ecosystems, and it is causing climate change with aluminum release in the air. And we talked about basically we covered different sectors, how energy conservation is one of the major way we can conserve energy and adapt to climate change.
Hello, our group was to discuss adaptation, but we found that the idea of splitting adaptation and, I'm forgetting the other, mitigation into 2 categories was a false dichotomy, and that all solutions should address both adaptation and mitigation. We also wanted to question how the government was going to plan to evoke massive cultural change and balance the cost of these adaptations at the same time. And we found that the best solution would be for the government to start by leading by example and implementing retrofitting buildings to make them more green.
Hi, our group on mitigation wants candidates to take a bold strategy for climate change. That includes taxing carbon and keeping carbon in the ground, building a high-tech competitive economy based on renewables and green technology that offers training that updates oil and gas workers' qualifications. We view that global decarbonization as an unprecedented opportunity to lead and establish our competitiveness for the next generation and improving our lives and legacy. We should produce world-class regulation, zero waste, and great train and bike infrastructure. Thank you.
Our group was talking about mitigation, and one of the key ideas was having to do with financial changes. First of all, they all agreed that we needed to stop fossil fuel subsidies, that we need to start looking at where pensions are going to divest them away from investments which are damaging the earth. We also need to look at moving money away from corporations, right? And our second thing that we really wanted to let you guys know about is social change, making sure that public protests is not considered a terrorist action, that our voices can be heard. And that protesting should actually be renamed protecting. And finally, on the agricultural front, we need to look at using our soil that's out there in the rural areas to sequester carbon, to be used for food forestry, and also to consider our farmers when we're looking at these things. Thank you.
Great, so our group was talking about a systems approach to adaptation, where we don't just want adaptation that has green labels and good sounding policies, but when you actually look at the bigger picture, what you're implementing is actually promoting deforestation somewhere else. You have to look at the whole picture. So looking at a systems approach to adaptation. Another example was even just in the process tonight, thinking about who's here, who's not here. So thinking broadly about, if the people who are here are the people contributing most to climate change because we have access, we have to think about the people who aren't here, who are maybe poor and homeless and can't make it out and are affected by these kinds of things and are not having a say. So we need to be reflective about our own processes. And last, sustainable food is a huge area for new innovation.
Hi everybody, Table 8 mitigation wants an end to oil subsidies. The question was stated, why can't local tomatoes be cheaper than ones bought in Mexico? Invest in green jobs, infrastructure, technology, support the training of the jobs and education in green technology. Demand transparency with trade deals, stop TPP, stand up to corporations. We are doing the tort harm to future generations, support electric cars, hold Canadians companies to the same standards even if they're working outside the nation. Support public transit, education on the tax, educate Indigenous rights as well as UN rights of Indigenous people, and take care of each other.
What a whirlwind there. So many great comments that we've heard reflected here. I just want to give you a brief idea of what's happening with your comments. We will collect them all in a report. We will send them to each of the MPs for a copy, and we will also include it online at www.climatechange.gc.ca as a submission for a town hall. We will also be publishing it on a few of the local groups' websites. Two of those that I know of are Divest Waterloo and Climate Action Waterloo Region. So if you're seeking to hear what everyone else said in a longer than 30-second brief, please feel free to look for that. Then I'd like to bring forward Laura at this stage, and you can introduce the next speakers.
My name is Laura Hamilton. I'm with a group called Divest Waterloo. And my other job for tonight is to thank the amazing organizing groups. We've been working together on this event since, I don't know, April, probably March. It was April. And so a really wonderful group. Representatives from all of these groups have been meeting every couple of weeks to pull all this together with the support from our members of parliament. So thanks to everyone on that team. So, youth and First Nations communities are particularly vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. And after all tonight that we've been discussing these issues that will be affecting our most precious resource, and that's our future generations. So we've asked two individuals to share their call to action with you today. And I'm going to be introducing them very briefly. And I also want to point out we're not just going to be sending the MPs the reports, we're going to be asking to meet with you and share the results and have a more fulsome discussion with you at that time about everything that's so our future generations and why really most of us are here tonight. I'd like to introduce our two speakers who will be doing this call to action. Niara Van Galen is an IB student at Cameron Heights Collegiate Institute in Kitchener, and Emma Smith is hails from Walpole Island First Nation, but she attends university here. She's in the Fine Arts program at the University of Waterloo, and she's president of the Aboriginal Students Association at the University of Waterloo.
Bonjour, I'm Indigenous Bekajmang Dunjba, my name is Emma and I'm a student here at UW, it was said, and I've been living in the city for about 2 years now. And one thing I've really experienced is that living in the city can really shift your perspective on climate change. You can really distance yourself because you're in a city, but that's not always the case. I'm originally from Waterloo Island, as was said. It's a reserve down south from here along the border in between Lake Erie and Lake Huron. It's on the St. Clair River, and it's about 45 minutes down from Anjanaw. One of the things about climate change is that I grew up thinking it was normal for our beaches to close because of bad water conditions. I grew up thinking it was normal to have to boil my water to drink it when it was unsafe. I thought everyone in Canada had to deal with this, and it wasn't until this year that I realized most of you guys never had to do that. I saw a lot of hunters lose their role in the community because the birds don't come, there's no ice fishing anymore, there's a lot of changes to the ecosystem. And as was said in a lot of the recollection of your talks today, is that change needs to happen now. That we need to have plans and we need to think about our future generations. My people believe that we do not own the land, we are simply borrowing it from our future generations, our children and our children's children, and we need to make sure that it's still here for them. What kind of, thank you.
I have 5 letters here that I'd like to present to each MP, so one for each, and I'd like to do that now before I start. Hello everyone. There are many people who are standing on a cliff of deliberate, unconcerned ignorance when it comes to climate change. When they look into the abyss of the future, they simply want the normal life their parents wanted for them. Unfortunately, with climate change already happening, it will not be possible for us to live the way our forefathers did. We must be better, and it must happen now. I expect the Government of Canada to set an example for the citizens of this country and the citizens of our world by ensuring that their every act contributes to the end of climate change. Through biological carbon sequestration, transitioning us to a low-carbon economy, encouraging population reduction, and helping us to restore nature. It will not be easy, but is there a price that can be put on the quality of life of your children and grandchildren? Please look at me and the faces of all the children on earth, in all honesty, and tell us no. There can be no waiting for the right plan or the right technology to fix things. We have had decades to find a magic bullet, and we have not found one. We have to proceed without it. Although technology will help us to end climate change, we cannot engineer it away. I once read that there is no good time to have a baby. There is no good time to rebirth our world. Of course, it is inconvenient that the biosphere has fallen ill. There is never a good time to be sick. But we still have to heal what we have damaged. I find it incredible that we can send a man to the moon, but we have failed to act proactively when it comes to climate change. We, the young generation, on behalf of all the other unique species on Earth, expect the government to make drastic changes now, because the biosphere is so incredibly fragile. We hold the government and every single adult in Canada and across the world accountable for all the actions you do and do not take. We must make another giant leap for mankind today, because otherwise all of mankind and every other living thing will suffer immensely. I challenge you and expect you to go and partake in this change, because to do nothing would be a betrayal of my generation. Thank you.
We'll now welcome our MPs for any closing remarks they'd like to present.
There is absolutely no possible way I can follow those very eloquent remarks. I think she crystallized everything that was meant to be done here today. I want to thank all of you for coming here today, sharing your ideas. I had a great opportunity to listen to some of your comments. For a moment, I thought I was confused because I thought maybe I was in the pharmacy, because you talked about organic food, you talked about vegetarian food. It's things that I have talked to my patients about prior to entering politics. So thank you very much for coming. Thank you very much to the organizers. Thank you very much to my colleagues also. But more importantly, the purpose of this consultation is to have a dialogue, to begin a process whereby the government and the people are not separated. We recognize and realize that being in the government does not give us a monopoly on good ideas. The best ideas come locally. And if I listen to your comments, there were many similar themes, whether it be local growth, local agriculture, regulation, education. All these things come from here, came from all of you. So please don't stop raising your voice. This is just one act in a long play that we are going to undertake. We're going to undertake this together, hand in hand, government and citizens and NGOs and other people who are also involved in this great challenge facing our time. So please make sure that if you didn't get a chance today to make your submissions, you can do it online. Keep engaging with us, keep active, and God bless all of you and have a good night.
Again, I'd like to thank you all for coming. This has been an amazing consultation, and we will have a parting song from the, I've lost my notes now. Sorry, the Good-Hearted Women. My apologies.
Ani Bajo, Josh Kwanangantuin Dishakas, magazine Dodem. The women and I are going to be singing, we sang a song to welcome and invite our ancestors in to be with us this evening and to help guide us as we sing this song, the traveling song. This is to say thank you to our ancestors for being here with us, and thank you to each and every one of you, and safe travels.